Hey everybody, it's the Nitty Professor, and today I'm here with Benny, who's tired, and Gizmo, whom you might be able to hear purring very loudly, and I want to talk about music and knitting. The reason being, it dawned on me that when it comes to my passions, I'm equally passionate about both music and knitting, and so I was thinking to myself, how are those two things connected? And I wonder if there are others of you out there who are similar. I'm sure I can think of other YouTube podcasters on knitting and crafting who also really enjoy music. In fact, there's one fella that I follow on Instagram, and his handle is Max Will Spin. And I enjoy his content in particular because I love spinning. Now, he tends to use a drop spindle, but I know he spins with a wheel. But he's also a professional French horn player. And while I can't lay claim to the title professional, I mean, if I went out and auditioned for the Sioux Falls Symphony, I probably wouldn't get in. But I'm pretty good, and I also play the trumpet. So I really enjoy his content because sometimes he'll have stuff about spinning on there. Sometimes he'll have stuff about horn playing on there. So what I'm about to sort of present includes most crafting, I would say knitting and spinning in particular, and music, but feel free to apply it to your hobbies. I mean, you may find there are connections between hobbies that you didn't suspect, and it's been pretty interesting to contemplate this. So let's look first at the notion of rhythm. The rhythm and the repetition that are inherent in both music and knitting, especially when I play jazz. And oftentimes people talk about the texture of jazz with the drums and the bass forming, we could sort of say the foundational fabric, and in my case, the trumpet adding like some texture on top of that. Music involves beats, measures, repeated motifs, especially in jazz, where the language is so unique, Jazz is built on riffs. There are melodies that have a lot of repeated elements to them. One time I was studying about melody, and the observation was made that every good melody consists of either successive scale tones, up or down, or ingredients in an arpeggio. So, thirds, fifths, etc. And it's so true. I mean, it's really kind of fundamentally basic. I could make up a melody just by practically saying I'm going to do 1, 4, 5, 8, and then throw in a few 1, 2, 3s, and it would be bum ba 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 da ba, and that's that's all it is, right? So knitting is kind of similar, really. I mean, there are knits and there are purls, and they occur in a certain rhythm, and there's a repetition, and there's generally a pattern, a very defined pattern. And in this regard, another thing that connects them both is that they engage the body and the mind, both in patterned and often meditative repetition. So, for example, it may or may not be meditative, but sometimes I play the offbeats when I'm playing the French horn in a march. And if it's not too tiring, it could get meditative, making sure that they're all timed correctly and they're in tune and they fit with what everyone else is playing, especially when it comes to background type playing. So again, I find some of this a little bit easier to relate to my jazz playing, but it's so true that, there's a lot of meditation, there's repetition, there are patterns that are very prominent, both in knitting and spinning and in making music. The idea of tempo, and even just, the hand actions. You talk about plucking. I have a history of playing the string bass, plucking strings and, manipulating yarn. Another thing that music and knitting share in common is the idea of reading these sort of abstract patterns. It's like its own written language. We have to read and interpret notation. I'm now learning how to read cable patterns. Never could really do that. The last time I did a cable project, which was only one, I used YouTube. But now I'm trying to figure out how to read those patterns. And of course, I've been a long time reader of needlepoint patterns with the colors. And in music, I think, my ability to read music is probably very helpful there. You have to do a lot of decoding You're decoding in music timing, pitch. You're decoding some of the expressive elements. You're trying to translate something that's really technical on a page into something that is emotive and that can move the soul, dare I say. And as crafters, we also follow charts. We interpret symbols row by row, and it's really not unlike reading. So I think there's probably, maybe in another video, I'll explore the connections between knitting and writing, which would be pretty interesting. But both music and crafting, knitting in particular, not necessarily spinning so much, but knitting, crocheting, demand a certain literacy and a symbolic language. We have to be able to interpret sequences abstractly and put those into a physical reality. So here's something that also occurred to me, is the idea of improvisation. So like this I'm totally improvising. Now this is very simple, right? This would be like playing C jam blues. Da 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 da. It's just 12 chord blues. It's just as simple as can be. This is likewise, it's just a tube scarf. Everything is stockinette, and all I have to do is figure out how the pooling's working out and how long I want to make it, and the size and all those basic things. But I can improvise in a more sophisticated vein. One of you was pointing out today, I think in response to my German video about my cabled hat, that once you get the idea down, like the language, I'm going to call it the language of how to cable down, then you can manipulate it at will. That's the same with jazz improvisation. You know, it's a language. You can't just play anything and call it jazz. It's like speaking. You can't just go call it a language. You know, you have to understand the grammar. You have to understand how it works, the function, how to take the bits and pieces and manipulate them creatively into something that can register in the mind of another person. So it's similar with, say, making cables or like Fair Isle. You know, you have to understand the language of that medium in order to be able to improvise and be creative with it, so that you're still in the medium in a way that others understand and they feel connected to that medium as well. But there's a limit, right? And it's fun to explore those margins, you know, a kind of a liminal, you know, I look sometimes at like Laka Baga and the things that she knits, and she has an art degree, right? And I look at those as like, wow, that's like, it's kind of radical, you know? So there's always opportunity to improvise in a way that incorporates your unique individuality and that pushes the margins of the craft forward and brings it into new territory. So that involves a lot of knowledge of like subtlety and inventiveness, and also kind of a bravery in a way, you know, that you're not just limiting yourself to the tried and true, but you're actually doing something that others can sort of consume and say to themselves, yeah, you know, that I get that, but that's kind of different, you know. Makes it fun. So improvisation is kind of your personal voice. Let's review, go back to this whole idea of the body as it engages in the craft of music or the craft of knitting. So, you know, here's one of my struggles. So I can improvise on the trumpet, no problem. I've been playing the trumpet. I've been playing, let's just say, valved brass instruments since I was 12. And I've honestly been playing the piano longer, but I have never reached a point where my muscle memory on the piano allows me confidently to just express myself on there. And there's something physically that's like blocking me. I keep trying. I'm not going to give up. I may be 65. Doesn't matter. I like to learn new things. And I don't know why I call piano learning a new thing, but I don't know. I have not reached the point of being comfortable physically with using that particular use of my hands as a vehicle for expressing myself comfortably. But when I play the trumpet, there's no problem. You know, I mean, I can, even without a trumpet, I can move my hands and I can like push the valves down. I know exactly what to do. It's all about muscle memory. It's all about this kind of physical skill that I have trained and honed within myself based on sensory feedback. I know exactly, like, you know, how to position my my face, the inside of my mouth and everything to make this tone or this volume or that volume. And it's very similar with knitting. You know, I'm getting to the point now where I can knit with my eyes shut. I can knit in the dark. I can knit in concert halls. I can knit when I'm watching a musical. I was knitting when I watched the musical 6. It just felt so right because I was, you know, channeling one of my characters in volume 6 and 7 of my novel, which has a lot to do with knitting. So both music and knitting and spinning, we can almost look at those crafts and others as well as a kind of thinking with your hands, where your body serves as an instrument of expression. And it's not just like your disembodied mind doing that. You know, the mind and body are working together in both of these crafts. And I think that's another reason why they're both so rewarding. So let's look at something I've addressed in previous videos, which is the notion of mindfulness and presence. And I think that's an obvious area where knitting and music have something in common because, again, with jazz, if I'm playing with a group of musicians, we're playing like, just say, quintet, quartet, doing some bebop music or something like that, there's a groove that establishes itself and you just get caught up in the moment, you know, and it's very similar with knitting, and I would say for me personally, even more so with spinning, because I've done enough spinning, and spinning it's more of a whole body exercise. So I have a double treadle spinning wheel, and the muscles of my legs and my arms and my hands are all involved. And a lot of times I listen to music as I'm spinning, and so it's almost like a double whammy there, you know, between the music that's entering my mind and the rhythm of my body. At the spinning wheel, I can just lose myself. It's total state of flow. Like Csikszentmihalyi, this whole idea of flow. You know, you're just lost in the moment. You're lost in the sound. You're lost in the motion. You're lost in the rhythm, and you get into this state of focus. Like you almost feel invincible. Like you could just keep going and going. You know, it's just such a wonderful thing. You feel so alive. You know, I just like that. So I think all three of these crafts, in my case, and probably there's more that I haven't explored, like crochet very much, etc. But spinning, knitting, music, they all can introduce me into a state of mindfulness where I'm calm, reduce my stress, and shall we say, kind of like ground me emotionally and take me away from things that make me feel out of control, like the news lately. So another thing that is really cool about both these crafts, or all three of them, the idea of structure. So the structure, and it goes back to what we're talking about like patterns and language and this type of thing. So if you look at the components of both of these, so knitting and music in particular, you know, music, you've got your scales, modes, rhythms, you've got a certain number of like rules that inform how it's made. Again, they're there to be broken, right? But they're still there. You can't have something that is totally without rules and call it music. It could be like maybe an anti-music. Just like, you know, if you just tangle up a bunch of yarn or something, that's not knitting, right? That's just chaos. So the idea of the structure inherent in both crafts, and even in spinning, you know, the structure of the yarn, the amount of twist, the width, the what's the word? There's a technical term for like the heft of the yarn. I've forgotten what it's called, but I'll remember it when I'm done. But the degree of thickness or thinness, the fineness, the maybe you want to have a structure of the yarn that is a little more complex, and it could be thick here and thin there, you know, but it's still structure, and it's that structure is what allows you to continue to create, to make some kind of order out of the chaos that we don't want, right? So we have to think in terms of how the structure serves as, again, I'll use this word grounding, you know, this grounding aspect that connects us to our own need for reason and order, but in a way that allows for creativity and freedom. So it's not just structure for the sake of it. It's not like structuralism, right? It's purposeful, intentional, orderly, without being imprisoning and restrictive. So there's another dimension that we can't leave out. All summer long I was involved in the Aberdeen Municipal Band, playing the trumpet. And one of the things that I look forward to about being in the band is seeing my friends and talking to other musicians. So there's a sense of community there. And I've been with these people now for years. And I see their faces and I just kind of light up, And it's the same with the Fiber Guild. We're meeting on Saturday and I can't wait just to be with those people again, be in the same room, doing something that we all share in as far as our enjoyment of it and the value that it brings to our lives. So the sense of community is key for both music and knitting and spinning. And also, in line with that, a sense of tradition. I have great uncles, but they were in circus bands. And they played, for example, in Barnum and Bailey's circus. And one of my great uncles was actually on the band in the movie filming of The Music Man. He was a trombone player. And I knew him growing up. I knew a couple of my great uncles growing up. One played the sax, the other played the trombone. And one time I got to play beside my Uncle Bill in his city band in Pennsylvania. This was back in the 70s when I was good enough to be in the same space with him and his buddies playing in this municipal band. And it just made me feel connected. This may or may not be true. My grandmother swore up and down that we had some kind of a relationship, maybe by marriage, with John Philip Sousa. I don't know. But the fact is that music has played a role in my family's tradition forever. And the same is true of crafting with thread. So both of these activities connect me to my ancestors. In fact, I might do a video about this ancestral connection soon. Probably when my first novel comes out, which hopefully will be just within a few weeks. I was talking to the person who's doing my cover art today, asked her to make some tweaks. She's very excited. And ancestry, it's so meaningful, right? And I think music and fiber crafting, they go back so far, and they have such tentacles in just a culture and materiality, everything from. And we can use fabric as metaphor, right? The fabrics that we wear in our body, but also the fabric of the culture, the fabric of the community, the keeping people together. And when you're playing music together in a community, everybody has their own part to play, but they fit together in a structure, which is so cool. And that accentuates even further the idea of community and the meaning of tradition. And arguably, I think the same is true when we're crafting together and we learn techniques from each other, and we share patterns and we share ideas for how to tweak this or that or improve it. Or, the other day I was knitting with some friends, and one woman was peering over the shoulder of the other and asking her about the pattern that she was using and how she was reading it. And they were sharing tips about needles. And in a way, that's kind of it's not a dissimilar collaboration to, with music, really. There's just the whole idea of working together for a common project is really meaningful in both of these crafts. So in any case, I hope you enjoyed this consideration. I was wondering if maybe you had any additional ideas, what the connections that you think might be between music and knitting or crochet. If you even are a musician like this, Max will spin, how he plays the horn on the one hand and spins on the other hand. And I would be very surprised if a lot of you aren't also interested in music or maybe art, and what connections you would see between these activities. So I appreciate your tuning in today. I hope you have an awesome end of your week, and I look forward to checking in with you soon, and I look forward to your comments. Y'all take care. Bye.